Hey, welcome back to Colicchio's Classroom. In today's lesson, we're going to be focusing on the African continent. Now, as some of you probably already know, Africa is not a country, it's a continent. One that can house the United States, China, and India in it. So you could consider that calling it a country is not only insulting to the continent itself, but to the 53 countries that are there and the 1.1 billion people who live there. Because Africa is so diverse, we're going to be focusing on 3 Western African kingdoms from 800 to 1600 AD. So follow me as we head to Kumbi Saleh. So the first place we have arrived is Kumbi Saleh, home to the first prominent empire of Western Africa, Ghana. Now, unfortunately for Western scholars and historians, the history of Western African empires were translated orally and not written, which is unfortunate, but considering many civilizations in the world, including Greece and India, all used oral traditions to record histories and stories, like the Iliad and Odyssey, or the Epic of Gilgamesh and Mahabharata. So oral traditions aren't a sign of a backward civilization, but rather one that compares to the great ones of old. The Empire of Ghana was located nowhere near modern-day Ghana, but rather Mauritania. It was located in the savanna grasslands south of the Sahara Desert. Ghana grew thanks to a profitable trade network that developed because of the high amount of gold in the mines near the Senegal and Niger rivers. With this abundance of gold, they were able to build lavish kingdoms, with their kings displaying their wealth to all the foreigners. They also traded their gold with merchants for a very interesting element: salt. What? Salt was actually equivalent to gold because of how rare salt was in Ghana. Traders from the northern parts of Africa, like Tagaza, had so much salt that they built their own houses from it. It was with this gold-salt trade that spread Islam into Western Africa. After Muhammad's death in 632 AD, Islam had spread from the Arabian peninsulas into Egypt by 670 AD and all throughout northern Africa. Because of the Sahara Desert, which is the largest and arguably harshest desert to cross in the world, Islam had trouble spreading to Western African kingdoms for decades, until a group of traders known as the Berbers brought the religion to Ghanaian merchants, who then converted to build trading connections which were profitable for business. The kings of Ghana later converted as well because they realized that the other northern African kings were doing it, and they kind of fell into peer pressure and wanted to sit together at the lunch table. But seriously, it was also for the fact that Islam was becoming an elite religion, and the kings wanted to demonstrate their power over their subjects, who were still at the time largely animist. With the kings converting to Islam, the language of Arabic was demanded because of the necessity to read and understand the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam. Ghana thrived for centuries starting in 800 AD. You know, the same year Charlemagne was crowned Holy Roman Emperor by Pope Leo III and tried to, unite all those ragtag barbarians because Europe was in chaos, which of course really didn't work. But Ghana lasted until about 1076, where they were invaded by North African Almoravids, and even though they were eventually able to break away from them, they never actually recovered and were eventually then conquered by the second great Western Empire, Mali. So let's look at Mali. Mali controlled the gold-salt trade after Ghana had been diminished by war with the Almoravids, and through their leader Sunjata, the first Mansa, or emperor, they were able to capture all of the Ghanaian empire. The salt gold trade was owned by Mali, so it now became very powerful and wealthy. Sunjata also set up an advanced bureaucracy, and having able administrators run finances, defense, and foreign policy, which is kind of like President Obama's cabinet, except way cooler because they got paid in gold. So after Sunjata died, his supposed grandnephew was picked to be the next ruler. His name was Mansa Musa, and he was a devout Muslim, and he made sure that his empire reflected his beliefs. Now, being a skilled military leader like Sunjata, Mansa Musa was able to capture Timbuktu and other cities, doubling the size of the previous Ghanaian empire. As stated, Mansa Musa was a devout Muslim, and as such, completed the Hajj to Mecca, which is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. On his Hajj, he brought over 1,000 servants and camels to hold all of his gold and various other objects. He single-handedly crippled the Egyptian money system because of all the gold he gave to people, both rich and poor. Let me put this into perspective for you. Mansa Musa was so rich, he was worth 6 Bill Gates, or 3,000 Taylor Swifts. Dude was a straight-up baller. Due to his vast wealth, Musa made Timbuktu a very luxurious place to live, bringing judges, doctors, and scholars to visit the city. One of those scholars was the famous Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta, who was way more traveled than Marco Polo, visited Mali after Musa's death but found an empire that was vastly rich not only in Muslim culture, but rich in beautiful women. He was also very peaceful as well. However, due to the combination of weak leaders and the fact that the goldfields were being moved eastward, Mali was eventually overtaken by the Third Empire, Songhai. Songhai, the third West African empire, overthrew Mali in the 1400s and made its capital at Gao, and similar to the other empires, thrived because they controlled the gold salt trade and other trading routes. The first important emperor was Sunni Ali, a devout Muslim who ruled for 30 years. He is remembered for capturing Timbuktu and being the leader of a very impressive military force with horseback riders. The second great emperor of Songhai was Askia Muhammad, who ruled for almost 40 years, which is also super impressive because around 1450, 40 was like the living expectancy of somebody in Europe, and thanks to, like the Black Death and not using soap. Askia Muhammad set up a power administrative system which helped organize the large empire. He also doubled the size of Mali and quadrupled the size of Ghana. His bureaucracy included ministers of an army, navy, and farming departments. He also created a tax structure which made Songhai even richer. With all of Songhai's wealth, however, there was just one problem. He never advanced his military. And unfortunately, in 1591, a group of Moroccan fighters used this thing called a gun to defeat the Songhaian soldiers who had swords and shields. I think this might be where the "don't bring a knife to a gunfight" phrase came from. So after Songhai's collapse, this ended 1,000 years of Western African civilization that dominated a trade network. However, the tales of wealthy African civilizations would not die with them because those tales of wealthy rulers, like Mansa Musa, would eventually spread to Europe, and a few hundred years later, countries from Europe would start to come and carve up Africa like a pie and, slaughter millions of people. Yay, imperialism! So why is learning about these civilizations important? Well, first off, we know that they had oral histories, which were handed down generation to generation until the Arabic language was learned by Muslim kings and nobles in the king's courts. Contrary to popular stereotypical belief, Western Africa, much like all of Africa, had lavish empires and civilizations, and in some ways were more advanced than those in Europe and Asia. Studying these African civilizations reminds us to look through multiple lenses when studying the continent and to not make sure that we fall into this trap of seeing Africa as this backwards continent, because all of Africa, not just Western Africa, was just, if not more diverse, and still is, a very complicated continent. Thank you for watching.